Hello.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Jenny Valentish? I always fuck up people's last names.
Well,
Is
no,
that
people tend to say Valentish, but it is actually
Valentish?
But
Oh, so I
Russell,
didn't fuck it up. I got it
no,
right.
I don't care if you do anyway.
Okay. Lovely to speak with you. For those who are just joining us, Jenny is based in Melbourne, Australia, and is a journalist, writes for people like The Guardian, and an author. And Jenny wrote one of the very best books I've ever read about addictions and trauma called Woman of Substances, which she very kindly sent me after interviewing me about your new book, which is called
Everything harder than everyone else. When we say new book, it's forthcoming. I'm still finishing it, but it's exactly coming out.
How long have you been working on the new book?
Since for about a year, and it will be out probably next June. And it's just been such a joy to work on. I think we'll get to it, but the polar opposite of working on Women of Substances, which was just super taxing and full of worry. Like, what am I going to have to talk about when it comes out? Because it's basically like an addiction memoir with shitloads of research thrown in.
An addiction memoir. Yeah, that's good. That's a very good précis. Okay, cool. Well, where do you want to start? Do you want to start about the old book or the new book? And then we'll just see where it goes.
Start with the old book so I can finish on a high note.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, it's like an upwards gradient. So
Yeah.
it's Woman of Substances starts in your childhood and it's a chronological journey through your life.
Yeah.
You had a profoundly traumatic childhood, huh?
I wouldn't say profoundly. I mean, it was traumatic enough to have had this, to have put me on a trajectory, and a very recognizable trajectory that loads of people will recognize. But yeah, I mean, I got really into drugs and alcohol first, age 13. And the number one reason was I really liked it. Because there are lots of negative reasons, but let's not forget there was an enjoyment factor. I really, really loved like drinking my dad's neat spirits. Gave me a huge kick. I thought, oh, this is me. I found myself. But the negative side was I suppose I was very lonely. Like, I experienced sexual abuse when I was 6, 7 kind of years old, and that immediately kind of separates you from your family. It wasn't a family member, but it immediately sets you apart, and you feel very sort of ostracized, or just different to the rest of them. So that meant that when I discovered alcohol, it was like a bonding experience. Because it can almost be like a religious experience, the feeling of getting drunk. And at first, at least, your brain's kind of flooded with things like serotonin, can be quite comforting. So I really latched onto that. But of course, there was this sort of negative side, which was I was also depressed, and alcohol made that worse. So there'd be this initial enjoyment point whenever I drank after school, and then it would kind of click over into depression and crying and sort of abusing myself in the mirror, and all that kind of stuff. And that was going on every day. But I just really clicked with it as well. It's such a strange, it's like in a relationship, isn't it? It's like an abusive relationship.
There's like a dramatic element to it which keeps you hooked into it, right? It's like very high contrast living, like
Yeah.
it's never mundane, and you're never really entirely sure what to expect any given day, and
Yeah.
that's it's kind of fun to some
And
degree.
it
Is that fair?
what's going on with you. So, some days you might be in a good mood and you're going to have the best time ever with drugs and alcohol, and then other times the worst time ever. But it's sort of ran in the family as well. Like, before I started drinking, I'd see my dad come home from work and like come straight in the front door and maybe put down his briefcase, but then go straight to the liquor cabinet. And I'd be like watching TV, and I could hear behind me, I could hear the door opening of the cabinet, and the ksh, 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 and the bok, bok, bok. And I could smell like the wood varnish, and I just almost fetishized it.
That's a really poetic description of what they call operant conditioning.
Ah,
Yeah, I talk about this a lot when I go speak in schools, particularly when I'm talking to parents, because parents are like, my kids are going to do drugs, and I'm like, you know what's really a good way to help them not is to show them better ways of relaxing after work or coping with your
yeah,
arguments with your partner. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Because to me, it was like, wow, what is this incredible thing that is so beguiling that somebody, the moment they walk through the door, would go straight to it. And also, my family was quite. We were much better now, but we were very much in our little silos when I was growing up. And so, on some weird level, I think I felt like it connected me with my dad, even though we weren't drinking together at that point.
Sure, but you had like a something to bond over.
Yeah. And also, like the book Women of Substances is about how addiction affects women in particular and how it's different for women, which initially, as I started writing it, I didn't even think it was particularly gendered, but then I realized how much it was. And it's little things like, I think I also drank because I wanted to be more like a man.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Let's talk about that. I've never really explored how addiction is gendered. Um, do you want to speak to that for a minute or
yeah, yeah,
10?
yeah. Well, so in my household, I definitely felt like, well, I felt like mum was sort of the more put upon parent, and dad had way more freedom, which included alcohol and also just growing up in the 80s and everything on TV being like, Harrison Ford films and stuff with the guys getting all the freedom and doing all the cool stuff and beating people up, and the women were just getting in the way and kind of. I just wanted to distance myself from being female quite a bit,
Mm,
and
mm.
I just wanted to do blokey things, and so alcohol to me was one of them. So that's a really early way I think addiction can be gendered. It's kind of the stories that we tell ourselves. Um, and in my case, there was quite a bit of internalized misogyny, perhaps.
Mm. In that you have to keep up with the boys or you're not good enough as a woman.
Outdo them, I'd say.
Out outdo them.
Well,
Right, right, right.
I don't know if it was in New Zealand, but in England there was a whole ladette movement in the 90s, which was basically it was just a few women in the media and the public eye who were quite so-called laddie in that they liked drinking pints and swearing and stuff. So they were called ladettes, and so they had that kind of attitude of drinking the guys under the table. And it was just a media construct, really. Like, why shouldn't they drink pints and not Bacardi breezes?
Yeah, and that is a media construct, and that's a social construct in that we gender particular behaviors. Like this is for boys, and this is for girls. This is for men. This is for women. When in
Yeah,
fact, behaviors are sociological. There's nothing
yeah,
inherently feminine or masculine about Bacardi breezes or I don't know, whatever your favorite beer is, right?
yeah. It seems like Bacardi breezes just have brighter colours and more sugar, really. I mean, I don't see why.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we metabolize alcohol differently. Yeah. Yeah, like our bodies are different if we're speaking in general terms and stereotypical terms, like the way men and women metabolize alcohol and process alcohol are slightly different due to
Yeah,
our sizes and stuff like that. But yeah, with the things we consume and the way we consume them. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a really interesting point. So you got into alcohol pretty early, and that progressed into other drugs as you moved
yeah.
through.
As quickly as I possibly could, really. I just was fascinated with the idea of drug use. Like I used to go to the school library or the library in town and get books on drugs out to see what was out there. like to me, it was like Alice in Wonderland. Like the idea that you could take something and then change and not be you anymore was so appealing to someone who hated themselves.
That
So
does sound that sounds appealing to me.
yeah, yeah. So the idea that I'd read these books and there are downers and there are uppers and there are psychedelics. It's like, oh, brilliant. How can I try them all as soon as possible? And so I worked through them all from the age of, I don't know, about 15 upwards. And there was I never injected smack, but that was pretty much it.
Mm.
Like anything else, fair game, very interested. Also a bit of a journalist head on. It wasn't all traumatic base. There was my kind of journalist, kind of critical mind, curiosity thing going on as well, I think.
I often wonder about that. I mean, I know addiction and substance abuse affects all people, and for obviously different reasons, and there are different drivers of, of those behaviors. But I often wonder when you have a super curious, high IQ, empathetic personality, yeah, alcohol and drugs seem like a really, I guess, like natural way to kind of deal with all that neurological noise, huh?
Yeah, and also you get people who experience quite traumatic childhoods and more successfully, if you like, adapted, and it didn't become the grist for their mill for the rest of their life. Like they maybe managed to assimilate and adapt better than someone like me, for instance.
Do you feel you've transcended that? Like a lot of people, their trauma kind of becomes, I guess, their public identity in some ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it's difficult. It was difficult talking about the book because in the media cycle, because having got it all off my chest and explored it and unpacked it, I wanted to put it away, like literally close the book on that part of my life, move on. Finally, at the age of I think I was 42 when the book came out. I'm 45 now, and then I couldn't because of course I had to then talk about it.
Because assholes like me want to ask you all about it all the time.
Fair enough. If you put something out there, then you're going to get asked about it. But then, yeah, it was very hard to. The last thing I wanted to do, having finished the book, was have the victim mantle or even the survivor mantle. I just wanted to be like, right, what's next? What's next in life? But definitely, I don't think about abuse or anything like that anymore like I used to. I don't mull over old things. However, it has intrinsically made me who I am, which is someone who's very naturally wary. And that's a shame.
Yeah. Where, as in, you have a really strong protective mechanism in yourself, and you have strong emotional walls between you and other people. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, way too strong. Like, trouble with intimacy, but also just suspicion of strangers. Even if, like, I bumped into a mate and there with a guy and they introduced me, my immediate default setting would be rapist or something. Like it's something I've been able to shake. I don't voice it, obviously, but
yeah. That would make going out particularly awkward. Yeah,
but it's always there, and I think loads of people could probably relate to that. It's just this ingrained thing in you that you carry around and you try not to let on.
How do you think that people who have been through trauma can, I guess, shift those subconscious, deeply programmed pieces of conditioning? So they start shifting their lens and experience of the world. Do you think that's possible?
I've given up on that. I've just kind of accepted that that guard will always be up. I don't know. What do you think?
I like to think so, but then I look at some of the cycles. I'm 40, little, similar age group, and I've been in and out of therapy since I was 24, and I look back at, the relationships that I've had, and while none of them have been terrible, a lot of them have been chaotic or like dramatic, and there's a particular like strain of partner that I have obviously been drawn to that recreate. I was talking to a friend of mine, he's 7 years old, he's a psychologist today, and he said to me that we often will choose the characters in our lives to put in them to recreate our childhoods and hope that we get a better ending or a different ending. And I guess that for me seems to be true. But at the same time, I do feel like change is possible. It just takes a long, long time and a concerted effort. Like you have to constantly learn from your mistakes and be like, it's just fucking tiring. That's the thing. Like, it's just a constant job to try and be better and do better and learn from your mistakes and not recreate the cycles that you're born into, which for me, I think is really important, because I look at my father, for example, and he is functional, but also still deeply wounded and damaged, and I would think could probably be happier. And I don't want to be like that. You know what I mean? So I'm like, fuck, keep trying, dude. Keep doing the work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you can really tell yourself some stories about the way you're doing things being okay. Like, yeah, I keep being attracted to people who are
This sort of
bad for me, but I like a challenge.
yeah.
So to try and win their affection, like I'd like to try and win it. I don't want it too easy, you know. You can do it for yourselves, can't you? So I have to watch out for that all the time.
Yeah, totally. We'll get into that dynamic of like rescuer or being rescued, and I don't think it's healthy, and I think it is possible to shift. I don't know if it's entirely possible to change like I don't know, exponential is the wrong word, but like shift like 100%. But I think we can shift on the dial. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it's maybe not a linear progress.
No, it's like recovery. It's like
really for you fuck it up, and then almost as punishment, get into a relationship that's not good for you at all. Like that's gonna serve you right.
I know, it's like some sort of karmic debt. I don't know. Yeah, it's very interesting. I wonder about it a lot, and I read a lot and try and watch different speakers, and I think there is a duty, particularly if you're a parent, to do the work. Like, we don't know what we don't know, but when someone points it out to us, or we have enough negative experiences and we hit some sort of like sick and tired of being sick and tired point in our life, then it's on us to sort of work on breaking those cycles, which are often intergenerational, whether we are aware of it consciously or not.
It's also our civic duty. I mean, because the behavior is going to be affecting everyone else, you know. And if you're not going to ever see a counselor or ever do the work, then you're basically saying to everyone else, well, fuck you. And do they deserve that? You know?
Yeah.
Not just your immediate partner. Your behaviors affect a lot of people. So I think it's like your civic duty to get therapy, for instance.
I agree with you. I got critiqued online recently for saying that often a lot of the online hatred and noise and call-out culture is actually a projection of people's inner pain and a manifestation of that. And maybe that's simplistic and journalistic, and maybe I'm dismissive, or maybe it's both things at once. What do you think?
So if somebody is calling out somebody else, you mean?
Well, I just think that I think online culture and social justice culture, and I observe this with quite a degree of academic interest and personal interest. And it seems to be a lot of noise and a lot of heat, but not a lot of like positive growth or change or coming together. And some people just seem to be more about the pulling down rather than the helping other people shift their values.
Because there was a push for a while for cool in culture.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, why not message the person privately and have a word, which appeals to me more. I can't remember what the counter arguments were. I guess it's like, we haven't got time for that nonsense.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want personal engagement with somebody that goes on and on, especially if they really, you know, make you very wary. Yeah.
But yeah, to my greater point, do you think a lot of that online culture comes from that, you know, talking about civic duty, do you think a lot of that online vociferousness comes from a projection of inner wounding? Or do you think that it's case by case basis?
Fueled by their own personal battle, aren't they? And that would come out, and it gets very simplified into these, whatever's going on in the news and whatever's sort of trending, you can sort of channel your angst and relate it personally to that issue, and you'll be rewarded by seeing that group of people who don't like people like you, and you can lock in and engage with them. And there's something I guess very dopaminergic about that. I guess your reward system's going to be going ding ding ding, whether people are agreeing with you or disagreeing with you.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Yeah, we forget about that. We forget that there is a neurological reward chemical process that comes from heavy use of social media.
Yeah.
So we deviated. You got into drugs as you moved through adulthood. What was the pathway out of that for you? Or was there one?
Yeah. I mean, when I first got into alcohol, probably within a month, I thought, actually, this is going to be a problem. So that was when I was...
A month in?
Mm-hmm. So that was when I was 13. I gave up for a month first when I was 18, and then periodically throughout my 20s, I'd give up for a month. Usually it was maybe just trying to wait for something I'd done to blow over. But then, all these terrible things were happening to me because I blacked out constantly, could never look after myself, and didn't have the foresight ever to think, if you carry on past this drink, you won't be able to get yourself home. Never would occur to me, whereas now I'm the opposite. I would always think ahead. So all these terrible things were happening, accumulating trauma, but it wasn't until I was 34 or 33, 34, I just felt like I was going to die. And it was just a feeling, it was probably a very depressed nervous system and, general sort of adrenal fatigue. But the overall effect on me mentally was that I'm certain I'm going to die. I'm going to walk out in front of a tram. I'm going to hit my head. Something's going to happen. And I couldn't shake that feeling. And I was so over it all. Like when you're younger, you roll with the punches. But at that point, I just couldn't stand it anymore. And I couldn't stop. And I was going to the doctor and I was saying, I can't stop drinking. Like I was always one sort of person who couldn't stop after one, although that's changed now. But at this point, it just felt like I had to have it in my system constantly. And I was really buggered. Like the person who abused me got in touch, which triggered this last 6 months of really, really heavy drinking and being very distressed with it. So up to that point, throughout my 20s and 30s, I'd have peaks of heavy drinking, and then it was like maybe I'd meet someone really good for me, and it would calm down, and then a peak, and then it would calm down. But at this point, it was just like kamikaze again. And I just had one really last bad, embarrassing night, and I can only piece it together because it was mainly a blackout. And I just woke up. I just felt this insane relief, like I'm done. And I just knew it. I knew I was done. So I count myself really lucky because I had that 100% acceptance. I think if somebody doesn't have that and they just think they should stop, it's so much harder, because it's the raw power the whole time, whereas every cell of my body just went, thank fuck, it's over.
What if you filled the space with? What if you filled the space that alcohol and drugs used to fill? Yeah.
Well, so I didn't drink for 8 years. And in that 8-year period, so the first year and a bit, I filled it with AA, which wasn't really for me. However, it was a great distraction because I thought, this is just, wow. Like, it's like I've just stepped into a portal into another universe. It's like people are talking in a different language. There's scrolls on the wall, like mottos everywhere, acronyms everywhere. It was always literature. And so my journalist brain was like, God, this is going to take me ages to get my head around this. So I was really distracted, and it was great in that sense. And then that kind of wore off, and I realized it wasn't for me. And so at that point, I started feeling really depressed and without purpose. And I thought, shit, I've got to do something because I can feel this abyss opening up in front of me. And then I went to a friend's father's funeral. I didn't know him. I just went with my friend. And the eulogy was amazing. It was a guy who's had like a really long battle with cancer. And the eulogy was about how he used to be a keen yachtsman. But then when he couldn't do that anymore, he took up something like violin. And when he couldn't do that anymore because of the cancer, he took up like chess, and he got super into chess. And then when he couldn't do that anymore, on his deathbed, he was reading a book on quantum physics. And I just thought, oh, that's amazing. Like, even in the face of existential and physical pain, this guy just wanted to keep learning new things. And so on the way home from the funeral, I decided that I was going to do this mission where every day for a year, I would do something I'd never done before. And to keep myself accountable, I would blog about it. So I did, and it's still online. It's called heymannowyourreallyliving.com. which is named after an Eels song. The Eels singer is very very negative and pessimistic, but this was his song where he kind of sees the light. So I named it after that. And as soon as I even had the idea, I hadn't even started doing it yet, I felt 100 times better. Like I had purpose, meaning. And then so doing this blog where it could be things like one time I was driving in the country and I passed a field of people going up in gliders. So I asked if I could go up in the glider with them. I went on, I worked on a train line, steam train, did all sorts of things. And I met all these people I'd never met before, having just been a barfly and then in AA with exercise. So a whole range of people and tried new things. And it was just an absolute lifesaver.
Have you found it difficult to, because often we just hang out with people who we vibe with on a subconscious level. And if our subconscious baseline is a bit fucked, we're surrounded by fucked up people, like speaking generally, or at least of my experience. Have you found it hard to bond with people and connect with people who don't have that as a baseline?
In my sober years, I became much more insular. Like I didn't really go out. At first, I tried to make myself go out, and then I was like, you know what? I actually like being in on my own. And maybe that was half the problem. Like I have social anxiety, not so much now, but when I was younger, and that was another reason to be drinking. So during that 8 years, I kind of either hung out with extremely wholesome people, like I did lots of animal rescue and things like that, or nobody at all. But then when I started drinking again, 2017, and I'll put the caveat in that I believe it to be successful, moderate drinking, I guess it's broadened my horizons more, and I have loads of scumbag friends now. I have a right gamut of friends, and if they're my age as well, often they will have had quite a colourful past and they've come out the other side, and so we have lots in common in that sense. Without it doesn't mean I have to go and get wasted with them. We have that kind of shared common ground.
So it is that subconscious, like birds of a feather flock together vibe.
Yeah.
But
I'm not attracted to people who are actively getting wasted, put it like that.
Yeah, okay, cool. So it's a balance. You've balanced it. You've shifted the dial a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. And you've, speaking of things that you used to fill the space and following you online, you're actively into Muay Thai.
Love it. Yeah. And it just wasn't as simple as giving up alcohol and getting to exercise, because I didn't really, in that 8 years I was sober, I didn't particularly get into exercise. So it's happened since I started drinking again, and it's been a brilliant way of balancing my life, like making sure that my number one priority is Muay Thai. Which makes it sound like I'm great at it, but I'm only learning. But still, I do it every single day, and I love it. And I wouldn't want to be hungover, because that would be a shit training session.
Yeah, you don't have to be good at it for it to be good for you. Like, it doesn't matter as long as you enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Why Muay Thai? Because this, I guess, feeds into your new book.
Yeah. Well, I live in a small country town outside Melbourne, and it happened that they do Muay Thai classes, but again, when I first did it, it was like when I first tried alcohol, it was like, I've come home. This is it. This is amazing. And also, it coincided with me making a police report about that historic crime against me. And so it was a really useful outlet. When you feel like you don't have any control over a situation, something like a sport, which is very regimented and controlled and structured, is awesome, particularly a combat sport where you just hit things. So it was the perfect thing to be doing at that quite distressing time. Is there another question attached to that? I forget.
No, not at all. I must send you a t-shirt. It says "Fighting Saved My Life" on the back of it. Do you want one?
Yeah.
AS color, size small. Would that be you? Okay, cool. When we finish this, I'll get your address. Because that makes me really happy to hear. Because I relate to what you're saying on a deep level.
Yeah, so you've got the Muay Thai, not meth. You've got Muay Thai Saved My Life. These are your shirts, right?
It's his fighting saved my life, which I
Right.
guess you can apply to anything. Yeah, I've got Muay Thai, not meth. I did another one. You know the brand Cocaine and Caviar? It was like quite a thing for a while.
Okay.
We did like a wholesome take on that. It just is cacao and cardio. Yeah. I'm quite corny. Like I'm learning that people don't like it. Like people either like really into it or they vociferously hate my earnestness.
I'm into it.
So oh, okay, that means a lot to me because I respect and appreciate you. And I keep meaning to make like a whole range of them, but I'm quite a disorganized person and I
Yeah.
fumble around. But it'd be funny to like just make corny t-shirts about like bench press, not meth, or like
Yeah.
endorphin, like bench
Well,
press, not beers or something, like fuck this whole, I don't know, just motivational shit. Because it takes a bit of effort to get into a training regime or take up poetry or learn a new language or dancing or whatever to
it does
feel good.
the brain. Like, if you've spent years creating these neural pathways in your brain, which were about addictive behavior,
Mm.
about drinking and speed use, which was my drug. They're very deeply scored in your brain, literally scored in your brain. So you need to create these new pathways, which is done by a new habit and doing that habit all the time. And you never completely lose that old pathway, but you can overwrite it with stronger grooves, if you like, in your pathways in your brain. And so, I'm pretty confident that Muay Thai and that learning how to use your body instead of just being slumped over a laptop, I'm pretty sure all that work I've been doing is way deeper a groove than alcohol for me.
Mm. How long have you been a journalist for? Were you a journalist all through your heavy using years?
Oh yeah, I started self-publishing a fanzine in my teens, and that got me a few columns in national mags when I was 18 onwards. Precocious young thing. So that went with the whole journalism kind of trope in my mind. The hard drinking journalist who passes out under their desk, and also I was mainly a music journalist at the time, so it was to be hungover all the time. Nobody would blink.
Right. Expected almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think things have got, do you think there's a gendered nature to women in music journalism? Like there's a whole bunch of like barriers you have to, uh, what's the word
Yeah.
I'm looking for?
Much
Um,
as I love to find
overcome.
gendered,
Yeah. Sorry, what's that?
much as I love to find gendered things, not so much really. Not these days. I don't
Yeah.
think so.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
I used to be a staff writer at a guitar magazine around the year 2000, and I'd be sent off to interview like Judas Priest and people like that. And of course, they're much older and they had some the woman kind of attitudes. But generally speaking, no, I don't think it's a particularly hard road for female music journalists these days.
I'm glad to hear that. Do you think we're improving, like as a society? We're talking a lot now in post Me Too era about, um, yeah, removing structural barriers for to gender equality. Do you think that's happening in your observations of the world?
Yeah, but like, so for instance, about 10 years ago, I was moderating a lot of panels, music industry panels, about safe spaces and abuse within the industry, and it was a hot topic then, and like certain things were put in place by venues and stuff to address things that women were saying. But right now, the same thing's going on within the wrestling industry. Like right now, there's a new hashtag speaking out, and it's like, fuck, this is 10 years later than we started having all these conversations. So, some sectors are slower than others, and there's so much room for improvement anyway. So yeah, these conversations are helping and changes are happening, but it's there's still a lot of pushback, and a lot of guys I think feel like there's been a pendulum swing too far, and this is all nonsense, and that's why you get people who just absolutely adore Jordan Peterson, who a lot of guys think speaks reason, because he wants things to go back to how they were.
And
Yeah,
like,
I mean, your
and
job is basically to be centered in the middle of that, in a sense. So mine
It is, but that's like the least. I think we're the least favorite people is moderates
yeah,
because we don't have a tribe.
everyone hates us.
Everyone fucking hates us. Like I'm a progressive leaning, left leaning moderate.
Me too.
Like, and yet the people who hate me the most in my online experiences are people whose values I generally agree with or actively work in the space of advancing. And yet my presentation of those ideas doesn't use that jargon or that language or take the right tone because I'm trying to address the middle ground. And yet, so I'm seen as, I don't know, I'm still trying to figure it out, but I find it very upsetting quite often.
I often have to think about that. Like, I think that it's the people who are really brash and unapologetic who just get away with murder and don't have to sort of then be caught in this web of you can do better and you should have phrased that differently, because they just blow everything off. Like your people like your Sam Newmans and your shock jocks and people like that. I don't know if Sam Newman's on your radar, but
No.
until very recently, they're starting to get their comeuppance now, but until very recently, like, nothing could touch them because they just didn't give a shit, you know?
Yeah,
So
they refuse. They refuse to be cancelled.
You personally, you know, if somebody says to you they're angry at something you've said, I know that you would be upset by that and you would try and explore that. And so, of course, that has more of an effect on you.
It depends. Sometimes if I'm in a shit mood, I'll snap back. And that's the worst thing you can do. Like, there are times when people have said something and I'm like, get fucked. But most of the time, my wounded inner child who wants everyone to love him is deeply upset. And I'm like, what did I do wrong? How do I figure this out? Like, I'm really sorry. And yeah, I don't know. How do you grapple with it?
You put yourself out there more than I do. Like, for me, writing Women of Substances, that's the only time I've ever been vaguely political, feminist, anything. Like, I've always shied away from doing that out of self-preservation. And actually, it didn't get much pushback. I don't know, like, people who read it seemed to be pretty grateful and happy about it. And I wasn't out there, like, banging a drum and being anti this or anti that. So I haven't really experienced massive pushback. I do try and avoid being too political. And I've never even been trolled or sent a dick pic, which for a female journalist is pretty amazing.
That's something, yeah.
Really, I'm obviously not putting myself out there enough.
Well, yeah, I feel bad for female journalists because I know they do experience exponentially more online harassment and hatred. Like, do you know Sherelle Moody? She does the Red Heart campaign.
No, it does ring a bell.
She has a running register of homicides in Australia, and I came across her work when I was touring Australia, presenting to heavy metal concerts about stopping sexual harassment, and we blew up this huge laser screen, like enormous, of the map of Australia, and every heart was a woman or child to be murdered, and but she's had horrific abuse, like her dog was murdered, and she just experiences horrific things all the time.
Pointing out actual cases, actual facts. You know, it's not like she's a left or right wing pundit for a newspaper whose job it is to spout bio that winds people up.
Yeah, it's not opinion pieces. Hey, new book. You've moved on from where you were since 2017, and you're working on this new piece for over a year now. What's it all about?
It did bounce off the old book because I was thinking about people who treat drug taking like an Olympic sport, and people like me who would like get some grim kind of pleasure out of just having one more cigarette before you go to bed, or one more whiskey, or one more line, and kind of thinking about the harm that it's doing to your body. People like that, when they quit, often get into running.
Yes.
But running seems to be the main one, and excessive running, like marathon running, ultra marathon running. And I was just thinking about that and the similarities between addictive behavior and that kind of singularity, you know. And then it sort of expanded into this whole book that's looking into endurance and why some people can endure and are willing to endure more than others. So it's mainly athletes, like quite extreme athletes, like bare knuckle boxers, deathmatch wrestlers, but also like BDSM practitioners and quite hardcore porn stars. And I've interviewed them about what it is that, to really get down to the nuts and bolts of what it is within them that gives them that extra capacity. Like this power lifter that I spoke to, Camilla Foggignolo from Tasmania, she was saying to me, she had a very traumatic childhood and extremely strict, extremely restricted, also sexual abuse. And she was saying there are way more naturally talented, powerlifters and strongmen out there than me. But I can endure that pain because I've endured so much emotional pain where they would just go, do you know what, this is too hard. So she'll train so much harder than them, which gives her the...
Is there a common ground amongst these people? Is there that common baseline of like fucked up childhood or?
Yeah. I mean, look, yes, everyone I've interviewed does tend to have a fucked up childhood. But if somebody had said to me, "Oh, Jenny, you've got to interview this athlete I know," and their story was basically they've been doing their sport since they were 5 and they're just really fantastic at it, probably wouldn't be interested in interviewing them. Like, there's got to be someone who's got he's got some kind of thing fueling, like angst fueling them, and they know that and they're willing to talk about that. And it was quite by accident, but quite a lot of my interviewees, it turned out, have been sexually abused. It's almost awkward for me like, to be going down that path again. But I would find out as I talked to them. That was their backstory. Like the two main bodybuilders I interviewed had both experienced that, for instance. Loads of the interviewees. But if not that, then a very chaotic upbringing where they just didn't know what was coming next. And so as they probably went through a chaotic adolescence and early 20s, and then they just knuckled down and created this world for themselves of extreme structure and routine. Again, like bodybuilding is so structured, it just brings order to chaos, I totally understand it. I couldn't understand bodybuilding before I started talking to people and researching it and watching it. And then I was like, this makes complete sense, to the point that I'm totally going to do it when I get a bit older.
With the people you interviewed who've been sexually abused, was that even across the sexes, men and women?
I am pretty sure there was a guy. I can't quite remember, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I can't quite remember who it was, but it's definitely ringing a bell.
I've been speaking with men who work in the anti-family violence space, and often the men that end up in prison have got undiagnosed mental health stuff, addiction stuff, and this history of sexual trauma as children. Yeah. And I think it's interesting to explore societally, because we still don't address the victimization of boys, perhaps, to the way that we could. And often they are, in fact, more often than not, they're abused by other men within the family group or, friend of a family. Yeah, and I'm curious to know how to help those men come into the light a bit more and help with their healing.
Yeah, that's not really, unlike the last book, it's not sort of solutions-based. Like the final third of Women of Substances was like, right, what can we do then? Whereas this one, it's more like, these people are going to tell me their stories. I'm probably going to have a go at whatever it is they do myself. A bit of immersive journalism. But it's not a redemption book.
What do you call it? I don't know. Exploratory? No, observational.
Saying exploitation.
Exploitation. Whoa. Heavy.
I really love journalists like Louis Theroux and John Safran and John Ronson, who just totally immerse themselves in the subjects. They often get dragged into it. Well, I guess like Hunter S. Thompson as well, to an extent. They become totally knotted up in whatever it is they're exploring. So I love that. And some of my interviewees are kind of human guinea pigs. Like Stella Ark, this performance artist, he's done every imaginable kind of thing to his body. So I've actually completely forgotten what the question was. Sorry.
I've forgotten too. What's I think we're talking about, like you said, it wasn't solutions focused, and it was in fact an exploitative work.
Yeah. It's just going on a wild ride with these people and like taking a look into their lives and their amazing, incredible routines and listening to them fathom why it is they do what they do. And they're all very succinct. I've chosen people who really have given this a lot of thought. You know, whether it's the deathmatch wrestler who's temporarily retired through injury, but he still needs that kind of masochistic bloodletting thing going on. So he does all his performance art where he swings upside down and like cuts his head open and splatters all over the floor. He calls it a bloody Pollock, I think. Like these people, they understand that they have these sort of mad urges that need to be met and dealt with. And so they're basically talking about how it is they process them through their sport or whatever their activity is.
It sounds like it sounds like through all your work. I mean, your journalistic work is often lighter, like the piece you just did with Nat from Nat's What You Reckon. You know, that's light. You know, it's a nice piece. But the books you write seem to really immerse yourself in the darkness of the human experience. Does that take a toll on you?
Well, I mean, even Women of Substances, I worked hard to make it kind of like a gallows humor.
Yeah, it's palatable, but it's still very heavy and re-traumatizing for you, I imagine.
That one was. This one isn't. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in people's shadow selves, but also what can that teach us? You know, like what have these people learned? What did I learn about myself? What have these athletes learned about themselves? These are generally universal experiences, even if somebody's had a life or incidents that are really out there, the reader can no doubt relate it to their life in some way, and it's helpful. Like I think my main drive is actually to be helpful.
Help individuals, help society, help both.
Yeah. Be the person you needed when you were younger, you know, and that goes for if you've learned a lot, if you feel you've learned a lot, then you can pass that on. So if you're a journalist or a broadcaster or whatever, you've got the power to do so. You know, you do that. That's your daily life now. It's passing on what you've learned. It's very rewarding.
It's incredibly rewarding. It's tiring, and I keep constantly having to, for me, revise how I do it on the internet. You know, like I love speaking in a crowd and in person, whether it's to 30 kids or 8,500 people at a metal festival. Like I love that. And I find that so much rewarding. And I do try and use social media in a conscious way to do that. But what I'm learning, I often get tripped up by, I would say, A, I can be clumsy with words because I'm a human being. B, I can be quite brash. And C, everyone has a lens of interpretation. And it's impossible for me to know what that interpretation is going to be. Something that I can say can be interpreted as completely different to what it means. You know, the conservative author Douglas Murray talks about it in The Madness of Crowds, how it's so bad for our mental health to constantly worry about every possible facet of interpretation of words on a screen, divorced from context, time, and space. And I struggle with that. So I'm trying increasingly to be like you, I think, from this day forwards, and put less contentious stuff on the internet and more like.
I'm a coward. I am. Like,
well, you get tired of getting cancelled, I tell you.
Have you been cancelled?
Oh yeah, a couple of times, 2 or 3 times.
I think that's very unfair. Like, look, you're on the coalface, and what you do is really admirable, and loads of people think that. Loads more than wouldn't think that, you know. And I might write a book that's helpful to someone, but then I'm not sort of putting myself out there by making tweets about it or Instagram posts which generate useful conversation. However, I don't want to do that because then I'd have to engage and it will eat my energy and all the all the things that affect you. I just don't have the balls to do it, and you do. I think that's great.
Fine. Well, thanks. I didn't ring you for a pep talk, but here I am getting one. I appreciate that. Jenny, I'm really looking forward to reading your book next year. I hope that, I hope that it continues to be written smoothly. I hope you've got plenty of work. Are you writing a lot for The Guardian and stuff right now, or
Yeah,
what you got going on?
Fit for the Age and Sydney Morning Herald. So all the moderate left, yeah, ABC.
Moderate left. I love the moderate left. They're my people.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
I'm nervous saying that, like.
I know. Regardless, I look forward to continuing to read your writing. I look forward to reading your new book, and I hope that our respective borders open and we can hang out, and perhaps do some Muay Thai together in the near future.
I really want to train with you.
Yeah, I would love that. I can come over and hold some pads for you at Don Miller's gym.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that'd be cool. He's a great guy. Met him long time ago. Okay. Thank you very much for taking the time to be so open with us and giving your energy and your knowledge and your insights. And God bless. May the force be with you.
Great series.
Okay, I'm just gonna I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.